it's okay.
Where to look? I need to like get this bigger.
Yes, we are actually live now. And yeah, hello everyone. Welcome to the weekly live streaming show of What is School For? My name is I'm the CEO of Classroom Without Walls and the host of this weekly live streaming show. You can also listen to us on the traditional audio-only podcast. Just search What is School For? So on this show, I interview leaders, educators, teachers, parents, entrepreneurs, business owners, and students and parents to come here to discuss, debate, and disrupt education. Our goal is to future-proof the next generation. Today, I'm really extremely honored and excited to have Shannon Galpin on the show to talk about her incredible journey to make such a big difference, on a global scale. So Shannon is the very first woman who mountain biked in Afghanistan, where riding a bicycle is actually illegal. And I actually didn't even know that and learned a lot from her to get prepared for this interview. And Shannon is an author, an artist, and a global activist. So she started her movement in Afghanistan and brought that movement to a global scale. And she is the National Geographic Adventurer of the Year recipient. And she's a former founder and CEO of Mountain to Mountain, and she is a multiple TEDx speaker. And Shannon's work has been featured in the New York Times, NPR, NBC, BBC, CNN, and numerous other places. So besides being an artist and author, global activist, Shannon is also an incredible mom. And she actually homeschooled her daughter for some time in a very non-traditional way. And we're going to dive into that. How did she homeschool her daughter? And she's actually homeschooling her daughter right now, and they're also working on a book together. So we're also going to talk about that. And overall, you are in for a treat. Shannon is an incredible woman, and I feel really inspired and just honored to have a conversation with her. And as always, a big shout out to StreamYard for being a sponsor of Classroom Without Walls. Over the last several years, I have tried so many different third-party tools to go live. StreamYard is my number one choice. It's my favorite. In the comment section, there's a link for you to check out StreamYard for free for 2 weeks. Check it out and send me a message if you have any questions. We are live on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Periscope, on Twitch. And let me know in the comment section where you guys are joining us live from, social media-wise and geographically speaking. Without any further ado, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Wow,
of course,
all the things.
Yes. So before we went live, I actually told Shannon I invited my husband, I invited my children. That's how much I feel inspired by your story and by your journey. And so I can't wait to help more people get inspired and discover your amazing story doing what you do. So let's get started so people can learn more about you. As I mentioned earlier, you are the very first woman who mountain biked in Afghanistan. And so tell that story and why Afghanistan and why bicycle?
Well, I always start off with I never planned to mountain bike in Afghanistan. That was never the intention. When I went to Afghanistan, I was there working with women and girls. I was there doing human rights work, and I went to Afghanistan in 2008, and I was there to see if I had. I went to Afghanistan to see if I had a role to play working with women and girls. And when I started working in Afghanistan, I realized that I saw bikes everywhere. And I'm an avid mountain biker. I live and work in Colorado. That's how I raised my daughter. And I saw bikes everywhere. So I'm just inherently kind of zoned in on bikes. But it was all men and boys. And so I saw bikes in cities, bikes in rural areas, but never women. If I saw women at all on bikes, they were riding side saddle. And bikes are inherently and historically a incredible vehicle for social justice. They're an incredible vehicle for access around the world, throughout Africa, Southeast Asia, in rural communities that don't have a lot of vehicles. They're an incredible equalizer. They're cheap in every country. They're easy to get. But if girls can't ride them, when there's a gender equity barrier, then that's still something I was very curious about. And so essentially in Afghanistan, I very quickly realized through my work and traveling there over multiple visits that I, as a foreigner and as a white foreigner, and I say that because I had a lot of friends who were Costa Rican who blended better than I did, that it was something that in some instances could be, I could be targeted because I looked very different. I'm 5'9", white and blonde, but it also could be used as a way to, it could be used to my advantage, essentially, because for Afghan men, if you are right off the bat looking non-Afghan, then they treat you like an honorary man. Oh, wow. They assume that you are essentially outside of the rules of Afghan women, while that is not fair. And while that is something that I really struggled with as I'm working with Afghan women and girls. At the same time, it was a way for me to challenge the barriers that Afghan women had to ask questions. Why barrier here? Because Afghan women at the time were boxing. Afghan women, it was this period post-Taliban where women were parliamentary members. They were becoming judges. There was a woman who became an Air Force pilot. They were breaking all these barriers, but they couldn't ride bikes. And so a couple of years into me working in Afghanistan, I decided that I would mountain bike as a way to challenge that gender barrier and to find out why was this essentially one of the last few barriers in Afghanistan to be broken. Why was it such a
Wow, what a journey, what a story. I know that to make this happen, you also kind of sold your house, changed your career path, as you shared in quite a few interviews. And so when you what is going through your mind as you were trying to make this decision? I mean, I know at the time you are already a mom, so kind of leave that and to devote yourself to this really incredible mission. And were you ever afraid? And what are some challenges that you had to overcome to make this a movement, to make this a reality?
Yeah, to start the nonprofit, to change my career, to start working in Afghanistan was a huge shift financially. I had to kind of be willing to take a massive risk and jump off the deep end. And having what was a 2-year-old daughter at the time, I had divorced, and I really had nothing financially. I invested what little I had, got rid of everything else I had, rented a tiny little apartment. But it really was the desire to, I always say that looking back, it comes from a couple different places. It was a desire as a women's rights activist, as a mother of a young daughter, to make a difference in the world. I'm a survivor of gender violence. I was raped when I was 18. I wanted to understand the ingredients that were necessary in a society for widespread gender violence. Afghanistan at the time was ranked, repeatedly number 1, number 2 in the world for gender violence against women. And the longer that I worked in Afghanistan, the irony being, you always kind of focus over there, somewhere over there as where you're going to learn about the problems in the world. And really, the more I worked in Afghanistan, the more I recognized it's no different than the problems that we have in America, with gender violence. It's just framed differently. The way we legislate, the way we our college campus rape, all the things that I was trying to learn in Afghanistan, because it was ranked so high with gender violence. We have the same frameworks here in how we treat women. And I knew that, having been raped in this country. And yet, I didn't see the parallels until I was working in Afghanistan. And the longer I worked in Afghanistan, the more I fell in love with Afghanistan, and with people I worked with in Afghanistan. And the more I learned about just the global similarities around gender violence, around women's rights, around activism. And the more I explored Afghanistan, because I started mountain biking in Afghanistan, and I explored Afghanistan without security, as a woman on a bike, on a motorcycle. I skied in Afghanistan with the Afghan ski team.
Wow.
I've gotten to explore Afghanistan in a way that Afghans see their country, not locked up in a car. That allowed me to, see the country the same way we see every other country, face to face, person to person. And
that is so powerful, because I also grew up in different country and coming to the United States when I was pretty young. And it is such an incredible experience to actually have a face-to-face conversation with someone that is beyond the media filters, right? All the biases, the selective messages that you have been receiving from the media. When you have real-time, real-life interactions with those people, like, wow, you finally start to connect with the strangers, the other people, at much deeper and much more emotional level. So I can definitely relate. Yeah. And I just want to say a quick hi to quite a few people joining us live. Hello, Alice and Elizabeth. And yes, and she's a homeschooling mom, and we're definitely going to talk about homeschooling for sure. And Josiah, thank you so much for being here. And Pooja and Lance, thank you for joining us live from Australia, and Pooja from India. So really great to see all of you. So I'm curious, so how has this very profound experience influenced you, what you do as an artist and as a mom? So can you share like some of the changes that, that you have observed in yourself as a result of this?
Well, definitely as an artist, my first experience with public art, and my own public installations, and working with graffiti art, and really how public art changes community, how it brings community together, and really the power of voice through public art was in Afghanistan. My first main public art installation was in Afghanistan, and that was an installation called The Streets of Afghanistan, and it was a collaboration of Afghan photojournalists and foreign photojournalists, which I brought together and created a life-sized pop-up street art installation. And the idea is there's very few galleries. I mean, at the time there was no galleries, there was no public art. So the idea was to create these life-size pop-up photography installations, and then travel them through public spaces, public gardens in Kabul, and main streets throughout kind of the big market streets in little villages, and allow Afghans to interact with their own images, which there's so many photographers and photojournalists that come through Afghanistan, but then they take the images and then they're seen in other countries. And so bringing this installation to Afghans, and then just setting it up, allowing them to interact with them, and then popping it up in another place, and just having these little one-day pop-up installations. That was my first interaction. And then I helped support a collective Combat Communications, which set up the first graffiti art workshop for Afghan artists. And that spawned, in 2009, that spawned what is now a thriving graffiti art, mural art movement in Afghanistan. There's several collectives. If you Google graffiti art or mural art in Afghanistan, you'll see several examples of mural art that you could see in New York or LA or anywhere, incredible muralists that they're using street art because Kabul has blast walls in front of all, every major building. You have this canvas around Kabul, and they're using public art to have a voice around corruption, women's art, women's voices, women's rights, peace, all sorts of themes that are incredibly important to youth, and they're using their blank canvases and their talent now that they know how to, now that they know how to use spray cans and mural techniques, and they're teaching each other. And that's 2009. So, 10, 11, 12 years later, you have a movement in Kabul. And so that really informed a lot of the work that I do now with my own street art and mural art back here in the country, and that I've now used in collaboration with my own daughter. And my daughter has worked with a Mexican artist, Diana Garcia, on climate justice and wildlife extinction murals in France and the UK and in Denver.
Incredible. So I love it. I have some follow-up questions based on this. And so Zizi is asking you to share your Instagram. So I'm going to share the screen again. Oh, so sorry, wrong. So here is her. So Zizi, this is Shannon's Instagram. I'm also going to copy and paste this in the comment section so that you get this. And I was actually, to get prepared for the interview, I was looking through your art installation and some amazing art creation. Really incredible, quite a inspiration. And it is even more so that you are actually collaborating with your daughter. Is she also into like art activism? And I'm sure your experience has a profound impact on her. So share that with us.
She is. We were really lucky when we were traveling for a year in world schooling. The focus of that was wildlife research. I was very lucky that my connections, one with being a National Geographic Adventurer and a fellow with the Explorers Club, meant that I was able to tap into connections with wildlife researchers and biologists. And her passion is activism, but her passion is wildlife extinction, conservation. So we really focused what is her passion? And she came up with the idea, and we kind of collaborated on setting up a little organization. At the time, it was little, she was 12, called Endangered Activism. And it was the idea of her focus being endangered species, but also that for youth, and this is, pre-Greta, youth climate marches, that activism for the youth was really challenging. It was hard for kids to TikTok. It was hard for kids to connect. It was hard for kids were being bullied if they were activists. So the idea of activism was endangered too, not just that endangered species, were the issue. And so while we were traveling, and it was in collaboration with her father and his partner, we kind of were in parallel. We weren't, we would go back, she would go back and forth every other month. She was a month with them and then a month with me. The months that she was with me, it was focused on wildlife research. So we were in Namibia, and we spent about 6 weeks traveling through Namibia, and we would go meet with wildlife biologists and scientists and conservationists and learn local solutions. And she just was there to listen. We're not there to volunteerism. It's not about, white Americans doing work. It's about us listening. What are the solutions? What are the problems? And then we later were in Borneo doing the same thing, and we were in Argentina. And then it's about learning how is that all interconnected? What are the problems then back in Colorado? Because we have endangered species, and Americans are one of the buyers for for wildlife trade. So the rhino horn, comes right through to Colorado, where we have this warehouse in Denver where a lot of the wildlife trade is housed that's seized in U.S. ports. And so we were able to go to this warehouse of death that has rhino horn and elephant tusks and snow leopard pelts and all of these just horrible things that we'd seen trafficked and killed in Borneo and in, and when we went tracking with rangers to see black rhino, we then are seeing black rhino horn in Denver and the whole circle of how these things are interconnected. But she interviewed everyone. We videoed it all so that we can eventually find the funding now to make the documentary of one young girl who's 12 and 13, interviewing through a youth perspective. How are the solutions there? How is it all interconnected to climate change? Because Borneo versus Namibia versus Argentina versus Colorado versus, all of the different places that we went, they're all different. They all have different climate. They all have different problems, but they all are interconnected to climate change. And like we have this really great piece where there's a genetics lab in Namibia with the Cheetah Conservation Foundation. And it's the only this high-tech genetics lab where they're studying cheetah diversity. And you're like, okay, this PhD genetics guy, okay, this 12-year-old, please dumb it down so that she can understand that all you're doing is taking cheetah poop and you're then figuring out cheetah diversity to understand, and he's writing all of these equations on a whiteboard about genetics, and she's just, okay, no. She's 12. It's like this high-level math about genetics. But we have it all videoed, and it's an incredible education on the road that we get to do. And what she then, how this relates back to art, is that through this, she is trying to synthesize how does she want to share that with the general public? Like, she have her own voice. And she ended up partnering with a Mexican artist, Diana Garcia, who we knew through a mutual friend, whose street art she adored and is a wheat paster. And wheat paste is a technique where you draw or photograph, create your art, and you print it, and then you essentially glue it, you wheat paste it to the wall. So it's very easy to collaborate. It's very easy for anyone to be able to create this. You don't have to be a painter. You don't have to be a highly skilled artist. You can collaborate. Kids can wheat paste. And Diana agreed to collaborate with Devin. And together they came up with a whole series of endangered species based on what Devin's research was, that they then met up in Paris, which was one of our last stops, a place that Devin and I, hi Kitty, a place that Devin and I spent a lot of time. We knew Paris very well. I had lived there in my 20s, and I had worked there several times since. And we met up in Paris. Diana printed the pieces before we got there and brought them with her. And we took over Paris completely illegally, because Paris is great that way. And we installed 13 walls and pasted a whale's tail in the canal, and left all of these endangered species across the city of Paris.
Wow, I'm just like sitting here imagining and seeing all the images in my mind. I love what what Alice mentioned here. Like this, to me, this is real learning. A classroom without walls, we say the best education happens outside the classroom. Exactly what you have shared with us, Shannon. I'm so inspired. And earlier you mentioned, like, I think many of us are familiar with the concept of unschooling, homeschooling, but you mentioned the word schooling. I want to make sure everyone caught that. So, like, for those people who are not familiar, so what do you mean by word schooling? So explain that to us a little bit more. I'm fascinated by that concept.
I learned it while we were traveling. Someone else used it because it was this idea that, so I think it was someone who they had used it. They were families that a lot of families who travel by boat. They live on their boats and they travel around the world by boats, and they were using that term. And I thought, wow, that's actually way more apt, because we don't have a home. We're living out of one bag. We don't have a home back home because we'd given up our home. I had no home. I had a storage unit with a few things left in it. And so I'd kind of given everything up twice. That was, we just financially, that was our choice. We couldn't do both. So our home was on the road in one suitcase. So really for us, the world was our school and the world was our home. And it felt more apt for what we were doing. It was taking, we didn't have a curriculum to follow. The only curriculum was math. We were following Khan Academy's math for the school, which was algebra at the time. And other than that, it was, where were we at the time? If we were in, for example, Borneo was a great example. When we were in Borneo, yes, we were doing mostly field research. We were literally, on the Kinabatangan River tracking pygmy elephants, and we were learning about the palm oil, situation and how that was changing not just the environment, not just how that affected the wildlife, but also how it was affecting the communities. How did it affect the economy of the villagers that had grown up on the riverbanks their entire generation after generation after generation? And the palm oil companies were displacing them. So how did that affect community? Then Devin had been fascinated by World War II. So she had been learning about, certainly Anne Frank, as most kids at that age do. They read the Anne Frank diaries. But she had always learned about World War II as American children do from European theater. They learn about the Nazis, they learn about Germany. She is also a UK citizen because her father is English. So she had she had more of an English perspective of Normandy from the Americans, and the crossing of Dunkirk from UK side. But then we're in Borneo, and she finds out that Borneo had been bombed by the Allies. So then there's this whole World War II theme that comes in, because Borneo, it's literally World War II. Borneo's part of World War II. And so then she starts to look at it from, we hear about the Japanese, but we only hear about it from Pearl Harbor. That's our only perspective, because we're only America. We only look at America. So then it's like, well, we flew in and out of Singapore. So we stopped, and there was a museum in Singapore that looks at the Japanese perspective from Singapore, but also there we go. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, you were talking about the Japanese Singapore. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
I think we lost her again. But I'm just like so fascinated by your back.
Good. Okay.
Maybe you can turn off the camera, Shannon. And I think sometimes that will help. Yeah, I love those questions that you guys shared with us, and I love this concept of world schooling. Like how amazing it is if we can all take our kids, right? Like I love how she mentioned there's no curriculum, and how we are just like there's no curriculum, and oh, I also need to charge my computer, and how there's no curriculum, and she and her daughter just like traveling and learning, and to me that is really the best education. Let me see if she's you're back.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back, Shannon. Can you hear us?
I can.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
it's
so
like such an
sorry.
incredible. Oh, don't worry about it. I know you are like up high in the mountains, so so don't worry about it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And here's like that is a really incredible story, right? Like how many countries did you guys go visit during that entire year?
So I think if I remember counting. Devin and I went to 17,
Wow.
and then she went to a few more with her father. Her and I
Wow.
actually tried not to go to too many, which I mean, we weren't trying to go to a whole bunch. We were trying to like live in the countries we went to. No, so it could be that she went to 17 total.
Okay. I mean, that is still a lot, right? So most American kids, when you think about it, their entire life is kind of in one location. Very few people will actually travel from one state to another state, right? So I think 17, that's like how many countries many people probably visit an entire life. I think that's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. It is a gift for sure. It is a huge
That's amazing. Yeah. So here's a great question from one of our live audience asking you, like, what benefits do you think, or this unconventional schooling or world schooling has had over traditional schooling? Because before this, your daughter were like a traditional like high school, right? Traditional middle school, like public school student, and now you have this incredible, I think, which is everyone's dream to do this type of schooling. So what are some big changes you see and like advantages over the traditional approach?
For my daughter and for me, the advantages definitely are she thrives, with immersive learning. Like her brain is very much like mine. She thrives learning by doing. She thrives by, if we're in a country, we're learning that language. We're learning, by going to museums. We're learning by interactions with people and doing, a walking tour, historical tours. And that's how I learn best too. I wasn't a good student, but I love learning. So I'm a constant learner. I've had multiple careers, but not because I'm a good student. It's because I'm a good learner and I love learning. So I'm curious. And that's how I think she is too. But the disadvantages are also there. We were living out of one bag. We were, doesn't have a lot of interaction with other kids because other kids are in school at the time that we're there. We weren't just like going to another country and staying there where then you would meet other kids or enroll in a sport or an art class or things where other kids would be, and then learning that language and interacting. We were, somewhere for 3 weeks, or we were doing field research. So she was with adults almost that entire time. And she's good with adults. So it was easy. So we're like, oh, it's okay because she's so good with adults. But that's also, she's 12 and 13. She needs kids. So that can be difficult. You have to really think about that a bit more than we did. We just didn't think that way ahead of time. So it's like, it has to fit that kid. My child is more of an introvert who's really great with, like, she'll be great in college because she's already more good with older kids and adults.
Mm.
Like a lot of kids, they need big social groups. They want big social groups. It just worked with my child in this way. And I think some of the disadvantages are just some classes, science and math, not every, like for my child, the math in particular was really, she ended up doing really well, but it was a battle. She would have done better with a teacher that wasn't Khan Academy. She did great when she came back and plugged back into a regular school. But there's definitely pros and cons. I wouldn't change a thing, but there's definitely not all roses.
I mean, definitely. I mean, like, I think even some of the disadvantages you mentioned, I think research has shown like how important it is for kids to be in a mixed age environment, right? So the argument can also be made the other way, because our kids, they're only happy. Actually, I just finished reading this book talking about gender difference, especially for teenagers. If their only like role models are from their peers, it's actually bad for them. So they need cross-generational like role model influence, like role models, like influence from those people, which I think is exactly what you are doing with her. I mean, 12, 13 years old, interviewing those like local scientists. Was she like, you mentioned that she's a little bit introverted. Was she scared to do this?
No.
Was that really outside her comfort zone, or?
That's her comfort zone. Yeah.
Wow.
She would have been uncomfortable with her peers, but she's great with older people. I mean, she was scared because it was an interview, which all of us are when we're first starting. I mean, I'm still nervous, with interviews because, okay, this is someone who's an expert, or, but like Diana, the artist, it was interesting because Diana was late 20s, I think 29, 30. And so here was like almost like a big sister or an aunt figure. And it was like two peas in a pod. Like she needed that at that time that they started, they spent like 2 weeks together. And so I just kind of stepped back and let those two do all the installing. And I kind of was like the assistant. I stepped back and I didn't do any. I mean, it was so hard. I wanted to install art so bad, but I carried the bags. I carried the bags, and I helped. I know Paris so well, so I was the navigator. Okay, here's we need to get here, we need to go there. Here's some of the sites that we can get to. Here's some possible wall locations. So I fed them. I got us to the wall locations, and I carried bags, and then I let them do all of the installations. I'm like, here you go. Because she had a mentor for that time period. That was just lively and Diana's like this kind of hippie figure that she has an energy I don't have. And so good for her to have that. Where Devin, when she was interviewing adults, was kind of had to be like more, she was a little bit more professional, a little stiffer, it was kind of more work. And then when she got to do the art, she just got to get messy, and it was a little rebellious, because it wasn't authorized. And so, and then after that, we were asked by the city of Oxford to do the same installation officially. For the first street art installation that the city of Oxford had ever allowed, because Oxford, every building's historical, but they wanted to do something around climate and the environment, and so they let us do the historical covered market. And so and Diana couldn't come back. It was about a month later, so Devin and I went, and in England did this installation, and I basically let Devin now knew what she was doing. She'd been mentored. She knew what to do. So I then acted as Devin's assistant for that. You need two people to do these huge installations, but I let Devin tell me how she wanted to do it. And then I helped if she needed, if she needed some advice. But then the two of us did all the installations. We let her have the authority of owning it.
Wow, that's quite a what an incredible experience. I'm sure this is something that she will cherish forever. And what you are doing as such an incredible mom, right? Like you are helping her, like building her leadership skills and owning her own voice and how she wants to do this. Is there a way for us to look at some of those murals, like some of the arts that you?
Definitely, yeah. So on my, you showed my Instagram. In my Instagram, in the bio of my Instagram, it says co-creator of endangered activism, and that Instagram is essentially the Instagram for that page with Devin. And if you scroll down, it'll have a lot of the murals because we've done multiple together since in Colorado, and it should have the link for Devin's as well. But it's at endangered_activism. And that's Devin and I's collaborative Instagram. And then Devin has also started doing her own art. She's doing a series of LGBTQ BLM stickers and pins, and starting to do a lot of her own activism around. We're both very engaged with Black Lives Matter and LGBTQIA issues, and she's taking on a lot more art around that as well. But she's assisted on a Black Lives Matter mural that we did in town, which was a collaboration with a lot of Black and Latino and Indigenous artists. But on Main Street, we did a huge road mural in front of Town Hall, and she did one of the letters for that. And
It's incredible.
She's now finding her own and wanting, now that she's 16, she doesn't want to collaborate with me as much. We still collaborate on Indigenous. And now it's like, to not be in my shadow, which is good. She feels like, okay, we collaborate on this, but I also need to assert who I am. And I'm 16. So
I mean, there are so many things I love about the story. I mean, as an educator, we always say that learning has to be personal. I love how this entire learning journey, so many projects are exactly designed based on her interest, and she loves this, right? It is such a great way to learn when you are learning what you love and still making such a global impact. And I just love it. So here's kind of a great question from Pooja, who is a young lady. And she asked, how can we embrace, she's based in India. So how can we embrace ourselves about doing the things that makes us feel fulfilled? Like what you are doing, right? Doing the unthinkable and inspired, how to overcome the hesitation when we have the idea, like when we have professionals around us. And yeah, so her question is like, how can we be as brave as you and doing the unthinkable and overcome our own fear, our own hesitation? Or did you even have any fear before you embark on this entire journey, work schooling and going to Afghanistan, starting a movement? Like, what is it in you? And not even to mention, I haven't even get to the personal part. You also survived 2 strokes, right? You lost language ability, memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, and all those personal challenges. So what is it in you that kept you going? And what some advice can you give to the young people out there? They can be as courageous as you.
It's always a very hard question because it's so personal for everybody. And I think I always look at it this way. I don't know why I don't have fear. And I'm sure that I do, but I don't have the fear of leaping. And so I think what it is, and I think why I'm not scared of leaping, is that I am not scared of failing. Because, okay, so we fail. We just try it again. We try something different. To me, the failing, and I think that's maybe why a lot of people are scared, is that, oh my God, what if I fail? And I look at the failing as the learning. I think that's why I'm not scared, is if I fail, that means I'm learning. And then I try it again and I try it again. And so I think there's 2 things with that. There's an artist that I follow who's in Denver. His artist name on Instagram is Detour, and He's an African American artist in Denver who every Tuesday he does a Tuesday tips, and he's a phenomenal muralist. And one of the things he said recently I thought was really interesting, because he was talking about painting a basketball court. He does he does a myriad of murals and projects. And one of the things I thought he said, and he just said it kind of off the cuff, like it was a side thing, but to me it was the thing. And it resonated with me because I think that's how I operate, which was he'd never painted a basketball court before. And so someone asked him to paint basketball court, and his first instinct was, okay. And then, so you say yes, and then you figure out how to do it.
I love it.
And to me, that's the thing, especially as an artist, because what, you're going to give up the opportunity to learn, and then you know how to do it. And then you know how to do it. And then you can say yes to doing it a million times. Or you could even pick a job to paint someone else's basketball court, and then you could make money. And so for me, the thing with failing, or the thing with fear, is that I think it's rooted in the fear of failure. And I'm not scared to fail because I see failure as learning. And that's what gets people stuck. And also, I think people see I think people are scared because they see, oh my gosh, it's so big. Like, so if you look at what I have done in my life, and so this young woman's question, if you look at what I have done, or even what my daughter has done, you're like, oh my gosh, it's so much. Yeah, but it all started with just one little thing. I just did one little tiny thing, and then I did the next tiny little thing, and then I did the next tiny little thing. It didn't start big. It just started with it literally started with a question. I'm curious about this thing. And then I went to see what that answer was. And then the next thing, the next thing, and the next thing. So it's not big. And so when you're doing it, it's not scary, because when you're doing it, it's a really tiny little step that is insignificant to anybody else seeing you do it. But then when all of those little things are together, then we're having this conversation about all of this stuff and a National Geographic this or whatever. And it seems huge because it's all of these little baby steps.
I love it, one step at a time. I love that's kind of how I start my own business, start before you are ready and then go figure it out. And then I also love the story, like one step at a time. It's not like there's definitely no overnight, what you have accomplished. And when I was reading Shannon's bio, I was like, oh my God, there's more. I was like so impressed. But yeah, I just have to remember this is an entire, like quite a few years professional, like decades of experience that you have devoted to this. Yeah. So I love that. Here's a great question from Alice, based in the US, and she's an amazing educator herself. So like kind of following on what we were talking about regarding homeschooling and education. So if you could advise the K-12 system about changing its approach, because I think you made a great point, Shannon, earlier. You were talking about so much fear. I think the fear in our students to a great extent is a result of our rigid educational system. And I see that in higher education, like more and more so over the last several years, the fear to make a mistake, the fear to get a B or C, the fear to not get an A is so strong. So what advice would you say and to those like educators in the system, like to make some shifts, to embrace more of this experiential learning and, doing what you love? And any tips, advice?
Oh, so I don't know how everybody feels about this, but stop testing. Could we just stop the testing? Like eliminate testing. Because we see it in other countries that don't test, and the kids do fine. But I see how much angst it creates, but also just, wow. I mean, I know I don't want to put that on teachers because they don't have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
But man, like the amount of time wasted teaching kids how to take a test, how to pass a test. I'm not saying that if you're a teacher and you're teaching algebra, that then you're not going to test your kids on what you're teaching them. But standardized tests, get them the hell out of our schools. Like, I just do not see that being a beneficial system for our children. Too many kids that have learning disabilities that then cannot make that work for them. But also just I want my kid to be taught. I want my kid to be curious and want to learn. And teachers want to teach. And I see them having all of that love crushed out of them. And I see all of the joy of learning crushed out of our kids. So how is that working? It isn't.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't see a C student succeeding less than an A student in life. But we think that is somehow, a huge deal. But I mean, that's another discussion too, of how we, think that, the grade matters so much, but mostly I think it's the standardized test. That would be my biggest thing. If I could change over the magic wand, eliminate standardized tests.
I mean, I love it. You can see from the comments, everyone's, yes, Shannon, go for it. Love it. Like, stop testing. And I so agree. I mean, I worked in education for
oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So what we're saying, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, if the second magic wand would be every year, K through 12 are required.
Yeah. Those are two big magic pills that we hope that we can just give to the decision makers. We can make those things happen. But I want to go back to what you mentioned about grades. I mean, you are definitely not the first person. I have interviewed so many influential people on my show. They were like, yeah, nobody ever asked me where did I go to school. Nobody ever asked me what my grades are. It doesn't matter. And we even have educators on the show I interviewed. They openly admitted that testing is really for the teachers and serves so little for the students, right? You want to make sure, especially if you're teaching a class of 300, 200 students, you want to make sure that your teaching is working. So testing is really for the teacher. It doesn't really serve our students that well, other than giving them so much stress and everything. Yeah. And I want to go back. So you mentioned that you and your daughter, I know I read on your website, on your LinkedIn, that you guys are working on a book together. So can you tell us more about that book? Is it coming out, or do you have something you can even show us where we can learn more about it? I think we are all fans of your daughter now, and we want to support her in ways that we can.
Let me grab it. It's right here. 1 second. It's literally
go for it.
It's not. This is the rough draft. But since I have it, just because it was on my daughter's desk, it's called The Rosette. And it's a graphic novel that she started. This was the other, here's one of the pages. Most of them are not colored. I don't know if you can see that. So it's essentially, it's a superhero graphic novel. We wrote it when we were traveling. This was all her idea. Let's see if I can find another good page. The idea is that, again, how to reach her age group or an age group below her. At the time she was 12, to talk about wildlife conservation, wildlife extinction. She loves Marvel. She loves superheroes. So this is about a superhero teenage girl who can shapeshift into animals and she has a sidekick who is a snow leopard, because she has a sidekick. She has a stuffed animal snow leopard that she's had since she was 4. And the snow leopard came with us around the world, like our little mascot, her best friend. And the snow leopard in the graphic novel is the mentor of the superhero, the Rosette. And so and he basically comes to her as a little girl and teaches, once her superhero powers start to emerge, the snow leopard takes her to what's called the agency, and the agency is run by wildlife animals, and it's like an MI6 run by animals, and they're trying to save the world from the 6th extinction. And she is the one human who was like prophesized to help the animal kingdom. And so when there's evil around, her skin erupts in rosettes like a snow leopard. So she's called the Rosette. And her very first street art project before the wheat pasting with Diana was a series of stencils that were snow leopard prints. And it was because they were silver snow leopard prints based upon the snow leopard. So most of the pages are just black and white. They've never been colored. So where the graphic novel is it's illustrated by a Colombian woman, Devin's other mentor, Maria Prieto, who lives in New York. She came with us to Borneo. And so when she came with us to Borneo, Devin and her worked through a lot of the character descriptions. And then while we were traveling, we had Skype messages back and forth around. Devin would sketch out on napkins how she wanted certain scenes to look. We'd take pictures, send them to Mariana. Mariana would illustrate, send them back, and photos back and forth, WhatsApp discussions. So Mariana illustrated it. Devin wrote it. And now we just need to raise the money to hire an illustrator. A colorist. We need to hire someone to color it. And then find a publisher.
Incredible.
The idea is that a series. This one is like the inception of the superhero, the origin story. But the idea is that there would be one set in Namibia, one in Borneo, one in Argentina, like one in each of the places that Devin did the research.
Yeah, wow. So. Incredible. I can't wait to support this and be a part of this. Yeah. So here I think because we lost you for a second. I think there are 2 things you wish to happen. One is stop standardized exam testing. What's the other one you said? And I think that's what he missed. Yeah.
Whoa, art, K through 12, required art class, K through 12, whatever that is, whether that's painting, drawing, welding, sculpture, pottery, but everyone should have to do art K through 12 of some sort. I think we know it helps math. We know that art helps empathy and compassion. It helps self-expression. It helps confidence. I think, Wall Street would be a lot better if all those men in Wall Street had to have done art K through 12.
I mean, I so great. Lots of research has backed this up, right? Like I know quite a few studies from Adobe. They were talking about how important it is for our students to have that creativity, the artistic expression. It is so important. And like business people can definitely benefit a lot. Look at Steve Jobs. He's such a visionary in terms of designing like artistic expressions. So I agree. I think those 2 wishes are really, really, really powerful. Yeah. Wow. I can't believe it has been an hour. What a fascinating conversation. You are inspiring people from all over the globe right now. And this is great. And so share with us, Shannon, where can people learn more about you and they want to support your art? Do you guys have a GoFundMe page or so give us more information that we can support you?
So I just started a Patreon page for my street art and community art, which is kind of the art that I put out into the world. and that there is a GoFundMe page for the Rosette, but then, which is on the Endangered Activism page. My website is my name. There we go, shannongalpin.com. That would have all the information. That has a link to endangeredactivism.org, which has information about endangered activism. But yeah, you can support my art through Patreon. Most of that goes out into the community. So that's going out into the world to help support community arts, street art, and the Rosette. The Rosette is really the big kind of next step, in terms of something that we need to kind of self-fund, to get a colorist and help us get a publisher. And then we can inspire more kids to care about the environment and wildlife extinction.
Incredible. I think what a really powerful school project, from like caring about this to actually go to the field and interview those people and then create a book. Yeah. When do you think that you also mentioned you guys are working on a documentary, like about based on the interviews?
That's the other thing of getting funding. That's something we're not going to try to crowdfund because it's just so hard, but we do need to find funding. We have all of the footage shot because that was shot in the field. And we have so that's basically just finding the funding to get an editor working with us and get that out. That the goal is to get that out at the end of this year so that the graphical and the video, which would be using all of the field footage of all these incredible experts, but interviewed from a youth perspective. And getting that out at the end of this year. And Devin was just announced last week, so I'll share some good news, which shows that world schooling, homeschooling is a good thing. She was just made a student member of the Explorers Club. Yeah,
congratulations.
Proud mama. Yeah. So it was it's a real kind of well, one, it's a huge honor, but it's also something that shows that, for something that's based, in science and exploration, it shows that, we can do these things. We can allow our children to learn driven by, through curiosity. And so the hope is that create these storytelling mechanisms that inspire more kids to learn about science, to care about the world, to learn about climate change and solutions that are not also just driven through a Western perspective, that are showing the solutions that are happening through other countries, and that those local solutions are how we need to learn.
Yeah. Wow, this is so powerful. It reminds me of, what Albert Einstein, he said that I'm not like smart, I'm just more curious than most people. I stay with problems longer. And it is so fascinating to see you and your daughter having this inside out approach to education, which I think is the way that we should be approaching education, not outside in, look at this curriculum, that curriculum, but everything's driven by her passion, by your passion, what you are interested in. And you can see how much she has like thrived on this journey, which is so inspiring. I think not only to other children, but almost all the people here are like older people. Everyone is just like so inspired and really wonderful, inspiring story. So thank you. Thank you so much for spending an hour with us, Shannon. And yeah, definitely everyone check out her and follow her daughter and check out more of their work and support them if you can. I think that will means a lot to her and to all of us, create a better society and better environment for us and the next generation. So yeah, thank you so much for a great interview, Shannon. And thank you so much, everyone in the live audience joining us from all over the globe. I hope you are inspired by her story. Definitely give this a share. And I'm sure the story can inspire many other people. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great weekend. And thank you so much again, Shannon.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.